Alright, so I'm going to show you real quick how to cape these deer out and try and do it fast, but also very detailed. So what I do is I always start inside the mouth first, and then we'll jump around to the back. I use razor blades, you can use scalpel, whatever you want, you just need something sharp. You're going to go right on this gum line. So you're going to follow that gum line around. And when you do that, this skin will start peeling back for you. So you just go right down that gum line, work just like when you were caping the deer, you're working that white back, go all the way around. Obviously you saw on that side, I'm just doing the same thing over here. You're going to keep pulling back on this and you'll see that white membrane open up. You just keep working that back, working it back. I like to get on this side as far down in the jawline as I can get. So I pull that back and just keep it right next to the teeth. Come around. Like I said, you're working that back. Once you get this down about as far as you can get without cutting into the actual hide, then you're going to take and come up here around the nose. This one's kind of got some mud in there. It's normally a little cleaner to see, but you're going to come on this nose right here on right up from the teeth. You're just going to cut straight in. And if you'll look at a skull mount, it'll show you kind of what you're looking for on this. With a skull mount, you'll see that there's bone that comes down and then the cartilage piece kind of swoops out. You want to bring the cartilage out, leave the bone in. So you're coming right through here, follow right down that gum line, just like that. And now you'll start to see, as you work that back, you'll start to see that cartilage is right here. So you're just going to go straight through and you'll kind of feel that bone. You just follow that bone backwards. Work that back where you see that white, and then you'll end up cutting across like so, and you'll just separate that nose all the way off of that. So that's what you're going to see right there. All this was cartilage, and then the bone starts right there. So you're just swooping that little angle right there out. And then there's what you end up having, is that cartilage like that. So then I just work this back to where it starts getting kind of tight. I don't go too far this way because you'll end up getting into the eye sockets. But just work that back as far as you can all the way around, top and bottom jaw. Once you get that done, this part's finished. You can pull that back up. Now we'll take this deer, we'll spin him around. Now we're going to cut a Y cut. So you're going to go get that hair pulled back. Knife is going to go in here. You're going to come to right there. Knife to here. So both of these will meet right there, and then you're just going to come straight down that back to where the meat stops so that it'll slip under. That's all your cut's going to be. You want to use a pretty sharp knife on this. I don't use razor blades here because they'll go over top of that hair and cut the hair, and when you sew that back up, you want that hair to be able to lay over. So I just come right in the back side of the pedicle. I'll cut in and I'll slide it back to there. You can see that's opened up there. So that's your cut that you're making. Now you just want to do the same thing on the other side. You'll come in right here, get it under, slide straight back, and then you want to meet those two points together. And it doesn't have to be perfect. You're going to sew that back up so it'll be fine. If you can make it where it hits together, that's good. And I try and leave a little bit of a flange on there and cut it off flat. Then I'll come right here. You're going to lay that inside and you're going to work it back just to the back side of that meat. Just far enough to where that meat will slide under. So you work that back to there, you're good. Now I'll take, here I use razor blades. You're pulling that skin back out of the way, and you're going to slide that down. Right here, pull this up out of the way. So right here you're getting into the ear canal. You can see that's the ear joint there. So you want to stay up next to the neck and just cut straight through that ear canal. And when you get in here, right here, you're going to have a hole. Right there is a hole and that's the actual ear canal that goes into the brain. So you cut that through. Do the same thing on the other side. You're not going to be able to see it as good, but just do the same thing on the other side. Work it back. You're going to cut through that ear canal. Once you get that done, I flip it back around here. You can use a flathead screwdriver or you can use a knife, but I always use one that's fixed blade. Don't use one that'll break down like this one will, because if that thing on the inside ends up breaking, that's going to come across your fingers, and this part right here gets pretty tough. So you're going to take this and you're going to go into where you started that cut at. You want to make sure that that's cut all the way in too. And then you're just going to take and you're going to roll and pry at the same time, and you're trying to separate that from the pedicle. So you just kind of take this knife and go in there, get up next to that horn, and you're just going to kind of peel and roll at the same time. Sometimes you'll see that it'll want to start separating. You'll leave a little hair up against that. If you do, take this knife or screwdriver and just take it on the inside here and pop that skin loose. Once you get on the inside next to that pedicle, it'll normally roll pretty good. So I'm going to do the same thing here. You can see that that's not completely cut in two. So I'll take this knife and just kind of back and forth work it right there to where it's separated. Now it's separated into two different cuts there. I'll take that and just start rolling it back. And as you roll it back, you'll see it's separating it from that pedicle. If you see some of this membrane, you can come in here, you can just help work that back. Gives you a little more room to get in there. So you're going to do that same thing all the way around. And I work it around until I get pretty well to this front right here. As soon as I get to this front, then I'm going to end up going on the back side and work it around, because it gets a little tight. Your skin that you've got right here wants to kind of get in your way. So then I'll come back, and now that I've got this ear canal separated, you can see that there. So you take the same thing, you're going to take that knife and lay it under there, and you're just working that back around. And this, sometimes some deer will pull. You can pull pressure against it and it'll kind of pull with your hand. Some deer are going to be tougher. They're not going to be as easy. So now I've gotten that rolled almost to where it's meeting. So then you can just take that knife, kind of run in there. It'll kind of pop and separate on loose, and there you're free of them bases. So then I'll come back to where this ear canal was, and I'll just work this down. Just going against that white cartilage, work it down to where that neck meat will basically, you can pull the hide under that neck meat. By caping down past that neck before you cut it off, that allows all this skin to be loose. If you leave that attached to that, then you have to skin all this with the head down. So I like to try and get that separated before we get to that point. Now you got the eye right here. So as you're caping this down, just pay attention to where that eye socket is, because you don't want to cut through it. When you get right here, there's an indentation right there. Once you get to that, there will be a little bit of meat. You're going to cut through that. Once you do, a lot of times you'll start seeing that fatty deposit that's in there. When you do, you're getting to the back side of that eye. So when you get to the back side of that eye, I like to get it down until I'm cutting, if you'll notice, I'm cutting behind where the actual skin is. I'm not cutting up here on the skin, I'm cutting back against that bone. That's why I like to use razor blades, because you're going to cut against the bone, and when it gets dull, you can throw it away. But anyway, you're going to cut to that eye socket. You'll notice right there, there's a lip. And if you'll take your finger and go inside that eye socket, you will actually feel that is the lip of that bone. So if you look at a skull mount, this will be the eye socket. Now you're going to cut basically right across the top, staying right inside of that bone socket. And like I said, I'm staying back away from the actual flesh here. You go around that eye socket. When you do, that eye will start coming loose. But a lot of people would cut right across here because you're so used to cutting membrane. I like to keep my finger in there because you're normally not going to cut your finger. And so you'll try and go across here this way at the back side of that socket. Now you're going to start seeing the eyeball. When you do, you want to cut right in front of where the eyeball is, and that's going to release that eye socket all the way. Now you can come on the outside, you can pull that skin back, keep it right up against the eyeball. And when you get to the front side of that socket, there's a little black piece there. That's a nictitating membrane that actually sits up against the eyeball when they're alive. So I want to pull this back, and I want to try and keep my blade inside of that socket and work it around, and it'll release that eye all the way in two. Now there will be a couple, you'll see right there, there's a couple holes, and what that is that's actually where that secretion comes out of that eye. So that's not a hole that you cut, it's just part of a hole in the deer. You're going to work that back. Now what you're getting into is you're getting into this tear duct. That tear duct sits inside of that the hide, so it goes against the bone on the inside. So when you get it back, you're going to work across, and you're actually going to go in that hole like so, working it down. Here you want to stay as tight to that bone as you can, because you'll end up cutting that tear duct off. And you'll see as I get that work back, that's where that tear duct was attached to, is that little indention on that bone right there. And that is tight. It's got cartilage that holds it tight in there, so you want to cut that, separate it loose. Now that I've got this work down to this point, I'll jump around to the other side. Now again, you're going to be doing the same thing. I work this back as much as I can, get it to loosen as much of it as it will, and then you're right back to the same thing. You're going to take this knife, you're going to go in here. I try and lay that hair out of the way and then get behind it and just roll that down. And you're kind of twisting that blade as you roll it. Or even, like I said, even with a flathead screwdriver, it'll do the same. But you're just going right up against that pedicle and working it back. And then you can kind of pull this. I don't have this ear all the way cut in two, so I'll go back through there and get that completely separated the rest of the way. Now that I've got this back, same thing, knife, and just roll back. As it gets tight, come in here and cut some more of this loose. Just stay tight to the bone. Just working all this back to give me more room. You work that around, it'll do the same thing. You'll end up getting separated right there. So now, same deal, give you some slack by cutting that white membrane that's at the back. And like I told you before, you'll see right here, there's a piece of meat that comes up and there's an indention right there. So you're gonna go across that meat. You'll see that fatty deposit start coming out. When you see that, you're getting close to that eye socket. Again, that eye socket will be raised up. You're gonna stay tight to the bone. When you get to the edge of that eye socket, you're gonna cut right on the inside of that eye socket. It's gonna roll back. I like to work this back just to give me room to work with. And now here, pretty much doing the same thing. It's the same exact thing that we did on the other side. We're going to cut across that. Again, you can put your finger in there, grab back on it. You'll stay back close to the eyeball, roll down, pull that hard. You're staying right inside that eye socket. The edge of the eyelid is right there. So you got to stay back inside that socket so you don't cut that eye socket short. You'll come across. That's the the tear duct. Tear duct is right there. That's that indention. Now you're just coming across. Now once I get to here, I've got this work back. I'm going to flip it upside down and I'm going to go ahead and make sure that that gets separated there on down as far as I can get it to go. And now is where you'll start coming in on what we did on the very first step of doing that jaw line. Now that we've got this worked back, work that back as far as you can get it on the top as well. And what you'll do is the actual teeth are going to be right here, so you can cut straight across that. And when you do, it'll open up that, put my finger there, and then just work this back. Now we're meeting up with those lines that I'd already cut from the very first step. When you do that, now this will be worked back. That side there is pretty well finished. Jump over here, do the same thing. Grab a hold of that hide, peel that white part back. You're cutting against bone here. The teeth are going to sit right inside here. You cut straight across, it'll expose that hole. You're going to put your finger in there, you're going to work that back, and now that one there is separated. You'll get that little bit of bottom. There's a little bit left on this bottom jaw. You go right across that. Here it's just like caping the deer out. That's loose. Now we'll jump back around on top. We'll have a little bit left right here at this nose. Bounce that around. Deer's caped off the head. That's what you got left. Once we get that done, you'll cut the horn. You'll cut that skull cap right through there, down and in, and then you'll come on the back side and cut right through there down, and it'll just leave you with this. I'll show you that in just a second. Then I go ahead and cut off the extra, but you can go ahead and wrap it up. We're going to go ahead and cut these horns off. I use a Sawzall. You can use whatever. I mean, I've used pruning saws before or whatever. But you're going to want to come across here. You can go as deep as you want to. Just make sure you don't hit these bases. For me, though, as a taxidermist, I like it to be somewhere right in there. So I'll go ahead. When I cut into that, I go down to about the lower part of that eye socket on this front cut. Then you'll pull that out. Then what you're going to want to do, and like I said, you can stay as far back as you need to make sure you know, the taxidermist can cut it off more if they need to, is what I'm getting at. But you're going to go right across here at an angle towards the line that you just cut. You got that brain matter in there, you pop that brain out. The brain has to come out of it if you're transporting it. And then you need to take and you need to cut all this off. So again, you can take a razor blade or that knife, but this meat and cartilage that's here on this skull, that part needs to come off if you're transporting it. None of this stuff can be left on the head. So you need to scrape this. I'll get it pretty well clean, but we're here in Tennessee, so it's going to stay here. But you need to run around this skull cap and get all that meat and cartilage off to be legal for transport. And that is caping a deer. It's pretty simple. It's not harder than what you make it. It is time consuming, it's a little tedious, but anybody can do this process if you take your time. And you can also take a doe and cape that off the head, so if you mess it up, no big deal, but that's what you're left with. So you can take that, and then you can take this cape that I've got wrapped up here, take it to your taxidermist, get this froze as soon as possible. You don't want to leave this out, especially if it's warm, so get this froze as soon as possible. This, you can put some salt on here to dry that stuff up. You're good to go.